Yes, Guyana to the world.
Globuspan is a Guyanese dialogue moving towards the realization of one nation in one Guyana. It's a platform that offers an all-inclusive discussion with the pros, the cons, the ones that is taken aside, and the ones that stand in the middle. Globuspan believes agreeing and disagreeing are part of the nation's building.
She is a beauty, beautiful Guyana, with wonderful people all over this country.
Globuspan believes every Guyanese voice is part of the nation's building. As we span the globe for voices from the diaspora and those living home, we stand on our commitment that we are all Guyanese working towards one nation in one Guyana. As the world turns on its axis bringing changes, we as Guyanese must adapt to those changes for a better Guyana for all. Globuspan stands on its axis with its belief that one nation, one Guyana, one destiny must include voices from all corners of Guyana.
With many flavor, 6 different people blended together. Raise your flag high in unity, we're family with one destiny. Raise your flag high in unity.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Globuspan Television here in New York. We are broadcasting live, and we broadcast every Monday nights from 8 to 9:30 p.m. throughout Guyana, the Caribbean, and the country at large. We are a fair and balanced network, and we can be heard on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and other social media platforms. Tonight we have for our guest, Mr. Ryan Cummings. But before he's a Registrar General of the Guyana Registrar Office. But before we get to him, I want to let all of you know that this program has been made possible by Mr. Noir Singh and our technical directors, Mr. Devin Bissoon and Mr. Ryan Gobin. The views expressed by our guests tonight are solely his and not those of the staff or management of Globuspan Television. Good night, Mr. Ryan Cummings, and welcome to the program.
Good evening, Professor, and it's good to be here on your program. And it's Raymond.
Raymond, sorry, Raymond. Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Cummings, can you give us a little background of yourself, please?
Well, good evening to you all. My name is Raymond Cummings. You will notice that my name is not spelled in the conventional way. It's spelled without the D, and it's one of the things that we deal with every day at the General Register Office.
Can you speak a bit louder, please?
Okay. Yes, you will notice that my name is one of the issues that a lot of people in Guyana have, and we deal with in the General Register Office. My name is not spelt in the conventional way, and I think that is one of the first things you will notice. I am a retired military officer. I still like to think of myself as a journalist. I haven't been practicing for the last 4 years. I am into radio and television. I have been trained and worked in radio and television. I am also the Registrar General. I'm also a priest in the Anglican Church. I'm a father. I'm a grandfather. I've been widowed, and basically that is it for me.
Thank you very much. You're a priest in the Anglican Church. That's very good to hear. I never knew that. Now, Mr. Cummings, your department is called Guyana Registrar Office.
It's the General Register Office. The legal name is the General Register Office.
Okay. What do you register there?
Okay. So we have certain legal obligations, and the General Register Office is operated by 2 laws. The Registration of Births and Deaths Act, that is Chapter 4401, and the Marriage Act, Chapter 4501. It is also managed, we have some other acts that deal with it, and that is the Immigration Act. There are some parts of that that relates to us. There is the Status of the Child Act, and there has been recently an amendment to the Registration of Births and Deaths Act of 2021 that also manage what we do. We're primarily responsible for the registration of births, deaths, marriages, and adoptions in Guyana, and the registration of births and deaths of Guyanese overseas. Basically, that is what we do.
How do one go about getting registered at the General Registrar's Office? What is the process like?
So there's different there are different ways that you are registered at the General Register Office. Every Guyanese, for you to be a citizen of Guyana by birth, or by descent, you have to be registered at the General Register Office. So at birth, and we all know that you are registered at the hospital, the place of birth, or if you are born at home, you'll be registered at the closest health facility. Now, what happens is that in every health facility across Guyana, we have a person who is appointed as a registrar. So when there's a birth or death at that institution, or if there's a birth or death close to that institution, and someone turns up to have that death or birth registered, that person is responsible for the registration, and there are certain forms and documents that have to be completed. When those documents are completed, one of those documents is sent to our office, and once that gets to our office, they're filed, they're entered into the database, and when you apply for a certificate, that certificate is generated based on the information that had been provided at the time of the registration of that event, whether it's a birth or a death. An adoption is done through the courts, meaning that the relevant documentation will have to be filed by the courts, at the courts, and when that is done, and a judge passes the decision that the child is to be adopted, that order, a copy of that order, is served on the on the Registrar General, and the General Registrar would then enter that information in the Register of Adopted Children. In the cases of marriage, when a person gets married, there are two ways of getting married in Guyana, either by what we call bans or notices, or you can get married through the process of obtaining a license. If you choose to obtain a license, then you'll have to visit one of the General Register offices, you along with your spouse, and once you visit there, we will process the license and we will issue you with a document which you take to the marriage officer. The marriage officer will then complete the necessary registration forms, enter your name in his register along with the appropriate signatures, and then he will register that marriage with the General Register Office. If you choose to do bans or notices, then the marriage officer, having complied with the law as it relates to publishing bans and notices 3 weeks prior to the marriage in the area of where both parties live, having completed that and completed the marriage, he will then file that information with the General Register Office. We will enter that information in the database, and then we'll be able to issue you with a certificate on your request. In the case of the registration of overseas-born Guyanese, that is births or deaths, the Constitution allows, the Constitution of Guyana allows for, if a child is born to a Guyanese in a foreign country, that child is eligible to be registered as a Guyanese born overseas. That the parents or the child, if they attain the age of 18 without being registered, can present to the General Register Office their birth certificate from whichever country it is that they were born. If it's an English-speaking country, just the birth certificate. If it's a non-English-speaking country, then they'll have to provide the birth certificate along with a certified translation of the birth certificate, their parents' birth information, their parents, some form of identification for them and their parents, a picture ID, so that we can process their registration of the birth overseas. With relation to the death of a Guyanese overseas, when a Guyanese dies overseas, the relatives of that person can obtain a copy of the death certificate from whichever country it is that they died, present it to the General Register Office, along with a copy of their birth information and a form of ID for them. That information being provided, we will enter the information in the database, and the certificate could be issued to the relatives or persons who may have so requested.
Very well. Very good explanation. I hope our listeners are listening, and they start to send me a lot of questions. But listeners, understand this. I can only ask so many questions on your behalf, but I will try to ask as many as possible. Now, Mr. Cummings, you're the Registrar General. If a child born overseas and is not registered at birth, can he or she be registered at a later date?
There is no time limit for the registration of a birth overseas. Once the child or the parents produce the birth information, the birth certificate rather, or proof of the Guyanese citizenship by birth of the parents, the birth of the child, their relevant identification documents, that child is registered. There's no time limit for that. However, there is a process for what is called late registration, and if someone asks that question, I think that is what they might be referring to. This is not a late registration. This is a registration of a Guyanese born overseas. I spoke about a Guyanese, a person being born in Guyana, being registered at the health facility that is closest to them, and that information being sent to the General Register Office, where we will provide them with the necessary documentation after those records are filed. However, for reasons that I don't want to get into, parents may have failed to register a child at birth. And let me just run back it, because there are some timelines that we must get clear, so that if persons are listening to us and they would have find themselves in that situation, they can easily understand what they need to do. So when a child is born, the parent has 14 days to register that child with the nearest medical institution or at the medical institution at which the child was born. If for some reason or the other the parent has not been able to register that child in the 14 days, they can visit one of the General Register offices, and we have offices across Guyana. I'll share that information with you later. And you collect what is called a declaration form. The declaration form basically says that you have delivered a child and you were unable, for whatever reason, to register the child. And it gives the medical institution permission to go ahead and register that child after the 14 days would have passed. Now, with the declaration form, that is taken to the health institution, and that health institution will then register the birth, and that information will come to us. But that process of a declaration has to be completed within the first year of the birth of the child. If for some reason the year has passed and the child still has not been registered, there's a process that we call late registration, and it is addressed in the Registration of Births and Deaths Act. All of these things are recorded in the Act and explained, where there is a process where the parent or the child or someone concerned can register that child after the year, and it's a process which we call the late registration, a late registration of birth. And in that case, based on the age of the person, the type of information to be provided would vary. But basically, what the Act requires is an affidavit presented to the Registrar General, requesting that that person be registered, and a testimonial from someone else of repute in society to verify that this person is of good standing and they know the person, and this person should be registered based on the information provided. However, you will understand that we can't just register a person based on the information they provide, because you'll have a lot of problems where persons might want to change their identity and all of that. And I know that that might be a question that might be popping into people's mind. So in addition to the affidavit, we will normally ask for proof of what you're saying. So it's not just that you're saying something, you have to provide proof of what you're saying. And if you're claiming to be a member of a particular family, you will have to have someone of the family members to identify you as a member of that family. In the case of a late registration of death, it's similar. If the person would have died and for whatever reason the death was not registered, there's a similar process that you can go about where a relative of that person who would have died would provide the necessary information and proof that this person is indeed dead, and we will go about registering the death. We will ask you for certain information to ensure that it is a person who had lived, so you'll have to provide proof of life and some proof that the person is dead, so that we can process that late registration, that the person died and that the person was never registered.
Thank you. Folks, I want to let you all know that today is a holiday in the United States, Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday, and it's being celebrated throughout the country as a national holiday. And also today, power has been exchanged smoothly between President Biden and President-elect Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris and Vice President-elect J.D. Vance. So we saw that transition today. Most of you probably saw it on television. And it was a smooth transition of power from one political party to the next. So that's what's happening in the United States today. I have a question which I'll take at this time because it's relevant to what you're saying. Let's say, for example, the person give me a long explanation here, but let's say, for example, I have children and they're registered, they're born in the States. Or in my case, my children are born in Canada and they're registered in Guyana as Guyanese citizens. Their children can also be registered as Guyanese citizens?
Let me put it this way. It's not an answer that you can say yes or no, because they have to look at the other situations. If the spouse of the child or the parent that was registered as a Guyanese born overseas, if the spouse of that person is a Guyanese by birth, yes, they can be registered, but they'll be registered through the other parent because one parent must be born in Guyana. However, if neither parents were born in Guyana, that child will be unable to be registered as a Guyanese born overseas. What can happen, and the Immigration Act allows for it, is that if that parent and that child is living in Guyana, that child can apply to be registered, or the parent rather, can apply to have the child naturalized as a Guyanese citizen. And that is a different process that is not handled by the General Register Office.
I have been, as you know, to the post office there, and I've seen a lot of changes in the department, the General Registrar's Office. How long does it take to get a birth certificate today?
Okay, we have implemented a number of changes since I took over the reins as the Registrar General. In a very difficult and trying time, it was in the middle of COVID. And as a result of that, we have implemented a number of changes. Persons who have been dealing with the General Register Office for a number of years would know that at one time, the only way that you were allowed to apply for a birth certificate is through the post office. So you had to go to one of the post offices in your community or at the general post office and apply for your birth certificate. We have changed that. We have put in place a front desk where persons can come in and they can apply over the counter at the GRO for a copy of their birth certificate. We have also implemented an expedite process. And I'm answering a question because you asked how long. So there are different processes. So if you come in and you go to the front desk and you request a certificate to be processed in the normal time, it will take you about 7 to 10 days at the most. And that is if you would have leave your application. If you ask for the expedite process and it is just a reprint of a birth certificate, it will take you about a half an hour to an hour. If you can also apply for the certificate through the post office, and that takes based on my last count, my last check, it was about 3 weeks. And that is if you apply to go to a post office and you apply, it gets to us, it's processed and sent back to you. It takes maybe just about three weeks. And you will appreciate the fact that I do not have control over the post office. The post office is an agent of the GRO. So we pay them to do that work. We also have a process where you can apply online. And up to today, I was discussing with some folks and they were telling me, oh, they're not tech savvy, so they can't apply online. You don't have to be tech savvy. The online process is extremely simple. If you can make a telephone call and you can use WhatsApp or you can use Facebook, you can apply online. It's very simple. It's as simple as sending a text message. We have the process where you can do the different downloads and all of that, but we also have the very simple process where you can pick up your phone, you can add our number on WhatsApp, and if you can't spell or you can't write, you can send a voice note or you can text the message, the information to us. Your information is processed and you are notified that your birth certificate is ready. When you notify that your birth certificate is ready, you can come into our office and you can pick it up, or you can ask for it to be sent to whichever address, or you can ask someone to pick it up. And this is for any type of the certificates that you have applied for. If you apply online, the process is, the wait time is similar. That is 7 to 10 days for the regulars, just a reprint. If you are asking for it to be expedited, you can get it within 24 hours.
And all these changes, oh, go ahead.
The time varies based on the process you use. And of course, if you come at 4:30 in the afternoon when the office is just about to close, and you ask to get a certificate expedite, the chances are that you might just not get it, and you might have to come back in the morning. So it varies. Generally, the expedite process, we say it's a 24 hours process, meaning that you get your certificate within 24 hours. And I say within 24 hours, meaning that you can get it before, but it does not go beyond 24 hours. The Registration of Births and Deaths Act allowed us, through its amendment of 2021, to have to do things that were not done previously. For example, we know that previously Guyanese, if their father didn't sign for them, they will go and do a deed poll to change their name to use their father's name. What the Registration of Births and Deaths Act has allowed is that instead of persons doing a deed poll to change their father's name or to change their name to their father's name, some people change their name because they change their religion and they want to be known as a different name and all of that. So what the Registration of Births and Deaths Act allows is for you to change your name and on your birth record. So instead of going and get a deed poll and spending a whole set of money, you present the Registrar General with an affidavit requesting that your name be changed on your birth record. That information will then be processed. Your records will be, the previous record you had would be amended to show the new names that you're using. And that process takes 7 to 10 days generally to get that done, because we have to cancel that record. We have to ensure that all the information on that record is filed in a way that it can be retrieved and a new record created and linked to that previous record. So if there's any query about who this person is, we'll be able to find that record and provide the information. And that is what is required by the Registration of Births and Deaths Act. So the time varies based on the transaction. The time varies based on the transaction that you're doing.
I have a compliment for you here from someone who said that last October, I came to the registrar's office with the expectation that it would take me hours to get a birth certificate. But I was surprised when I got it in less than 45 minutes. I couldn't believe it at all. So my question to you, this person is giving you a compliment about that. Are all these changes, pardon me?
I must say thanks for that. And I like to hear when persons would have had good experiences, because normally you only hear when someone had a bad experience. You know how we are.
Right, that's true. Now, all these changes took place under your leadership?
Well, those that I've spoken about, they've all been implemented since I took over. As I said, I took over there in the middle of COVID. We had to find innovative ways to ensure that persons continue to be served, that persons were allowed to carry out their business, and therefore we had to find innovative ways. And yes, I immediately, when I got there, sat down, looked at what had to be done, and began to implement changes to ensure that we were not in breach of any of the laws of Guyana, so that we will create issues for persons when they were preparing their records, to ensure that persons get served quickly as possible, and get out of the place. One of the things that I must say, though, that I would really like to see more persons using the online process. For some reason or the other, too many people are still afraid or timid about it. It's very simple, and I want to encourage more persons to use it, because as I tell people, you can literally sit at home, apply for your certificate online, and you just pay one visit to the GRO. That's to pick it up, if you're in a hurry.
Mr. Cummings, I have another compliment for you here, and this is surprising. This person, Dr. Rose, please tell Mr. Cummings that the young lady at the front desk in his office has been very courteous and helpful to me. I was there in December, and I couldn't believe it. Normally, when I go for anything to the government, people are always abusive and rude, but she has been extremely courteous to me, and I got through as fast as possible. See? Compliments.
Thank you. I must say thanks, and I will convey that to my staff member. I think that some of them are looking at the program, so I'm certain that they will hear these compliments, and I'm happy that people are sharing their good experiences, because normally people just like to share the bad experiences. And if you come to the office, you'll realize that every transaction a person does. And that is one of the things that I implemented as soon as I got there. Every transaction a person does, they receive a receipt for that transaction. That receipt will tell us what transaction you're doing or you came there to do. And it will also tell you when you're supposed to be picking up, when that transaction is supposed to be completed and when you're supposed to be picking it up. And and that is one of the ways that, one of the things that we've implemented to force people to accept ownership for what they're doing, because you will know if something goes wrong, you will know who is responsible for it. If something goes right, like the compliments the young lady is getting, we will know who is responsible.
Who is responsible?
Can do.
Who is responsible for the elevator? Is that the post office of itself? Because this person is telling me that I had bad knees and I had to climb the stairs and it was so high the elevator did not work.
Yeah. The elevator, okay, let me say this, and I don't want to throw a sister agency under the bus, but the GRO, we are renting that space in the post office. So the area that is occupied by the General Register office, we pay a rent to the post office. The post office owns that building. So we are tenants, and if we're tenants, we cannot just go and fix something in the building just like that. However, we have been working with the post office, which is a government corporation, and we are trying to get that elevator up and running. And you imagine if he's saying that he visits the office and he visited the office and he has a bad knee. I have just about 100 staff up there. Some of them are pretty aged. Some of them are my age. Some of them are not much older and not much younger, sorry. And therefore, it becomes a challenge, even for my own staff, to be up and down the stairs. I've had to implement, for want of a better word, a runner, who would pop downstairs to look at persons who might not be able to make it up the stairs. We have that process where we have, if someone is there to do a transaction, it's not the ideal thing, but it's something that we had to put in place because we have to facilitate every Guyanese. We know that we have some Guyanese who are disabled, and therefore we put systems in place. And that's one of the reasons why we have the online process too. So that even if you don't want to run up the stairs or you can't make it up the stairs, you can have your transaction done online. And I'm certain that if you say when you do the transaction online that I would like to pick up my stuff, but I can't make it up the stairs, we will make arrangements to somebody to take it down to you, and you don't have to worry about that. But the short answer is that the General Post Office, the GPOC is responsible for the elevator. I know we've been working with them to get that fixed, and we're hoping that sometime during this year we'll get it fixed so that we'll be a little more comfortable for persons using the office.
Thank you very much for that. Very, very simple explanation. I hope everyone is understanding it. Now, my next question to you is this, Mr. Cummings. If someone does not register their child at birth or a family member's death, are there consequences?
The Registration of Births and Deaths Act says that if a person who is who has an interest in the birth or death of a person fails to register that birth or that death, that they can be convicted, they can be charged and convicted for failing to do so. It is not a step that we would want to take. We prefer to work with persons by educating them of the importance of a registration, because without a registration of birth, it's like if you're a non-person. And working up there, I've had some really sad stories with persons who would have lost uh, property, persons who crimes were committed against and could not get justice because they had no registration, they had no identity. And therefore, I would want to work with people. We've had cases where I can remember one particular case where a woman had 7 children and refused to even give the children the information of their birth so that they can register themselves when they became adults. And I had to literally point out the law to her and remind her that she can actually face prosecution if she fails to provide the information. But generally, we don't have to get to that stage. Most persons who don't register their children is as a result of their lack of understanding of its importance, or 2, their inability to understand the process. And therefore, we have persons who are working in communities throughout Guyana. And we do regular outreaches to communities. And we do regular educational programs in communities to encourage persons to register their children. If you would have attended some of the national exhibitions and so on, you would have seen that we had booths set up there, and it's all part of our process to educate people, to encourage persons to register their children so that they can form part of the democratic process. Look, for example, we have the president announced late last year, that monies will be paid out to every Guyanese. You have to get either a passport or an ID card. And immediately what happened is that all the persons who didn't have ID cards or passports started running to come into the office, because what? Some of them were never registered. And we were able to do, I think it's nearly 2,000 registrations. And some of them, it's not that they were not registered. Some of them were registered, but their birth record did not have a name, and they had different issues with their birth record, which we were able to sort out in that period of time. So and I'm saying this because it shows that if persons have the will to come forward and to say, look, I have a problem, and you don't need to be able to have any fancy words. You don't need to have anybody come with you. If you know that you've never seen a birth certificate for yourself, if you have never been registered, or you don't have an ID card or a passport, you can just visit our office, and we will work with you to ensure that we have a registration done. If you're not registered, we'll walk you through the process. We have a team of staff that is all they do. They go around looking and dealing with persons who have not been registered.
Now, this might be a technical question, I'm not sure. But if a person is 15 years old and was never registered, but this person now wants to have a driver's license, which I think you start at 16, and the person come to your post office and said, look, I never had a birth certificate before, but I'm 17 years today, and I come to register now. How would you know the person is telling the truth, or truthful or false?
Yeah, that's it. If a person had never had a form of identification, that is when we depend on them to be identified. And we get that every day. It might seem as though it's a very technical question, but every day we get that. We use one of their siblings or one of their parents who would identify them and say, I am the parent of this person who was born when and they will use their identification card to identify the person.
Okay, good. Now, are all marriages supposed to register? By the way, are all deaths registered at the General Registrar's office?
All deaths are supposed to be registered, just as births. All deaths are supposed to be registered at the General Register office. And they start with the same process of registering at the closest health facility where the event would have occurred. So even if it's an accident on the road or if someone dies at home, then we have a registrar in the health facility in every community. So after the doctor would have pronounced that person dead, it's a responsibility of the relatives to take that registration form to the nearest health facility to have it registered. Normally what happens, the parlors and the persons who deal with the disposal of bodies would normally guide the persons where they have to go to ensure that the death is registered.
Okay. And all marriages are supposed to register as well. What about divorces?
Divorces are not registered with us. It is something that we are looking at. We are trying to see what amendments will have to be made to the law to ensure that when a person is divorced, that information is lodged with us. But then you will appreciate the fact that a person can be married in Guyana and get divorced in another jurisdiction. So there will still be issues with that.
I know your department perform marriages to a number of people who doesn't want to have a big ceremony and so forth. What is that process like? How do you start that process to get married at the registrar's office?
Okay. So in addition to issuing license, we also do marriages for persons. We facilitate marriages for persons who wish to do so at the General Register office. And the process is very simple. At the time when you're applying for your license, you will request to be married at the General Register office. At the moment, we perform marriages on 2 days, that is on Wednesday and Fridays of every week. So if you want to get married, you don't wait until the weekend then come. It takes 4 days. The law requires that the license are lodged at the General Register office 4 days before it is issued, the petition for the license, that is. So having petitioned the Registrar General for the license, there are certain checks that have to be made. We check to ensure that, one, for a number of things, including that the persons who present themselves there to be married are indeed the persons whom they claim to be, that they are both still legally alive, that neither of them are still legally married to any person else, and that they're free from any impairment to make them eligible to be married. Once you've crossed all of that, the license is issued. And when the license is issued, then you're free to be married. You can be married. You can take that license to any marriage officer, or you can seek to be married at a GRO. If you decide to get married at GRO, then you'll need to tell the clerks when you're applying for your license that you want to be married at the GRO. They will go through the dates that are available based on bookings and so on, because people are booking all the time. And once and we work the dates out, and you're given a date and a time to come, and you come at that date and that time, and you get married. And there are 2 times of the year that we normally do marriages every year, and that's during the month of June and during the month of December, because those are the months that most Guyanese get married. And therefore, we recognize that people, because of the whole festivity, the June Bride thing, and during December month, a lot of Guyanese come home, and a lot of them, they try to get married at a time when their relatives are here. So we actually conduct marriages every day during June month and December month. And of course, on February 14, we would always marry people on February 14. That is Valentine's Day. We'll always set aside that day for a day when we conduct marriages at the GRO.
How can someone obtain a license to marry someone, to be like a marriage license officer? Is through your department?
The process starts and ends with our department. It's not a complicated process. For the Marriage Act stipulates that for a person to be a marriage officer outside of the General Register office, that is, you have to be a religious leader, so recognized and appointed by your religious organization to be a marriage officer. You haven't been appointed, ordained, recognized by your religious organization to be a marriage officer, you will then apply to the minister through the General Register office to be considered for appointment as a marriage officer. Once the minister approves, your name is gazetted in the official gazette as a marriage officer. We ask you to attend a training session, which is generally about 3-4 hours on one day. And during that time, we try to teach you our processes of registration. And once you go through that and you understand how to register marriage and how to ensure that your filing process system coincides with ours, so that we can ensure that you haven't conducted a marriage, that the person can get their license, you're given a document which allows you to marry people. It's basically very, very simple.
I have a message here from someone that said there are some Hindu marriages that do not register their marriage to anyone, not even the pandit or the registrar's office. What happens if that person should be separated from his or her spouse to the property? Are they allowed to have half of the property?
I can answer that. That's a question for the courts. That's the question. Anything to do with division of property and rights as a result of marriages and all of that, that would be a matter for the family court to deal with. If I try to answer that, I'll only be speculating.
But well, I don't know if you know this, but there's some Hindu weddings where there are no registration.
I don't know why we're being biased. It's not Hindu weddings alone.
Okay.
There's some weddings that are not registered, and that's a fact. Because as I point out to the marriage officers when they attend the training, while they're performing a marriage ceremony, they're wearing two hats. They're wearing the hat of a religious leader that performs the religious function, and they're wearing the hat of an officer of the state when they're registering the marriage. So it's two different processes, and many people think that they're one and the same, but they're not one and the same. The religious ceremony that persons perform during the marriage has nothing to do with the state. What has to do with the state is what people generally refer to as the signing. So you can have all the religious ceremonies performed and the religious acts performed, and you can be considered married by the church or whichever religious order you belong to. but you will only be considered married by the state if you would have completed all the necessary processes and you have been so registered. You have to have the legal age to be married. You have to be divorced or separated. The legal end must come to a previous marriage. If you were married before, you have to be of sound mind. There are so many different things that you have to go through that will before you can say yes, this marriage is indeed legal and valid. I don't know what the religions ask for. Different religions ask for different things, but I've known people of all religions that have been married according to religious rites, but they have not been married based on the legal definition that we know of.
Is
So
there a
it's not
standard
just-
age for marriage in Guyana, or is it based on religion?
The age of consent in Guyana, it's 16 years old. You have to be above 16 years old. But if you are below 18, there is a number of considerations that have to be met before you are issued a license to be married. Those processes normally entails checks with the human services to ensure that everything is above board, that there's no issue, there's no case being made against anybody because of course, the age of consent is 16. But it doesn't mean that as soon as a girl turns 16, you could marry her without any consideration. We've had cases where persons have matters in the court of statutory rape, and they decide that they're going to come to get married so that the matter will be thrown out in the court and these sorts of things, you know. So we're very careful where marrying persons under the age of 18 is concerned. We always check with the human services and the legal people to make sure that there are no issues and no impediments to that. But generally, from age 18, you're free to marry. Once the other issues will have been met.
I was asked to ask you this question, but I don't know if it's you the person to answer it. What is common law marriage, and how long one can be living together in order to consider common law marriage? I don't want to answer that question.
We don't. I wouldn't want to venture to answer that question.
Okay.
That is the question for persons that deals with property and all these different things to deal with. I wouldn't want to venture to answer that. I deal with legal marriage.
Okay. How many offices do the Registrar General have in Guyana throughout the country, and in what areas?
Okay. As we speak, we have 4 fully functional offices. And when I say 4 fully functional offices, I mean 4 places that you can go and have any transaction conducted. And we're talking here about Region 1. In the regional office at Region 1, we have offices there. We have an office in Region 2, where you can go at the regional office. It's in the same building with the GRA, that you can go there and have that that done. The transactions completed there. We also have an office in Region 6 in the RDC office, that is in New Amsterdam, and we have an office at Lethem in Region 9. In addition to that, we have trained a number of officers throughout the country. We have not been able to open offices in every region, but we have persons trained in every region that assists persons with registrations, and those are the people who would normally be with us when we go to do outreaches in those areas, because every year we embark on outreaches to the different regions to ensure that we meet the people where they are and have them registered and put certificates in their hands. And of course, we have our main office at the GPOC building in Georgetown.
Okay. Now, if someone had a birth certificate in the 1970s or 80s, is that birth certificate valid today, or he or she has to get a new one?
Let me answer that question this way. Birth certificates have not been decommissioned. We have never decommissioned any birth certificate. So it means that any birth certificate that you would have had, once it was issued by the General Register Office, and the information there is the information at the General Register Office, then that birth certificate is valid. However, we have over the last 3-4 years, persons who would have applied would have noticed that, one, the birth certificates are now being printed. They're no longer being handwritten. It's being printed with certain security features embedded in the document. And it also have a QR code at the top left-hand corner of the certificate. Now, for agencies that require the birth certificate as a form of verification of identity, most of those agencies are requesting that you get an updated birth certificate. It's not that you cannot use the old certificate, but some of those agencies are requesting that you get one of the new forms of birth certificates. And there might be a number of reasons why. Because in the days when persons were writing the certificates by hand, we found that a lot of errors were made on those certificates. And those errors resulted in persons using names that are spelt differently from how they were registered. And therefore, it creates issues when a person needs to verify their identity using their birth record. However, persons need not panic, because there was an amendment to the Registration of Births and Deaths Act in 2021 that allows the Registrar General to amend names on the birth record. So if you would have had your name spelled in a way that was unconventional and you wish to have it, and notice that I'm not saying right or wrong. I'm saying the unconventional way of spelling it, because if you see my name, you will realize that my name is one of the names that is not spelled in the conventional way. You can choose to have your name corrected to be spelled the way that you choose to use it. You will have to provide us with some certain affidavits and identification documents and so on, and we can have it amended. But the short answer is no, but it's advisable that if you are going to conduct transactions and you're going to need a birth certificate as a form of verification of who you are, that you get one of the updated certificates. I'll tell you this quite frankly. We started using the new birth certificates in May of 2021. That is the printed certificates. And within a month, some of the embassies were refusing to accept the handwritten certificates. And they were asking persons to go get one of the new birth certificates. So it will save you a lot of hassle if you just apply for the certificate before you go to do the transaction. And the process, as you would have experienced, Dr. Rose, is not very difficult. It's not something that will be difficult for persons to obtain.
Thanks. We'll go to commercial break. So folks, stay tuned to Globespan Television. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in 1 minute. Allfromonesupplier.com. That's the website name, allfromonesupplier.com, where you can go and order all your West Indian Guyanese foods, groceries, curries, roti, fish, meat, anything you want. And it will be delivered to your home. You can use your EBT card, your credit card, your debit card. The number to call is 718-551-3292. 718-551-3292. Where we are in the country, it will be delivered to you, and that's in the United States. So all from one supplier, all from one. One is a number, not a letter, O-N-E, one, supplier.com. And Globespan Television. This is the 31st year they've been in business. This means that they're very experienced and can take you, book your ticket to take you any part of the world. They have upcoming tours to Dubai, India, South Africa, Norway, etc. They have offices in Rosal and Val Park in Guyana. That's Rosal Town. And Val Park in Guyana, and also in Chaguanas in Trinidad and Tobago. The number to call is 718-845-0437. 718-845-0437. That's Travel Span, where you can travel, go book your ticket and travel any part of the world. And they're there to assist you in all your undertakings. Thank you, and let's get back to the program. Mr. Cummings, I was at the registrar's office, as you know, and the space is very cramped. How long can the employees survive in that cramped space?
We are surviving. Of course, at the time when the General Register Office was began using up there, we didn't have as much staff. We didn't have as much records. Some of the things that we're doing now were not being done, and therefore the space was adequate. But we are outgrowing the space. We have outgrown the space. We have to get more space. I know in a matter of time that we might be looking at getting a new building. Of course, we are part of the government of Guyana. We are under the Ministry of Home Affairs, and therefore, when it comes to movement and having a new building and all of that, that will have to be a matter of a budgetary allocation. When you visit the office, you will realize that we're constantly trying to make the best use of the space that we have as our role expands and we are required to do more things. One of the issues that we have to deal with is our records, and that is even more important than the space where people sit. The records, having our records secured, having our records properly stored, managed, and preserved. We're doing the best we can, and we continue to work to ensure that we serve all Guyanese.
Good, great. Now, I've noticed that the system is fully computerized today, but before everything was being written in books and whatever it is and stored away and everything else. Let me say that you have a failure in a computerized system. Let's say for 4 or 5 hours. Do you have the records listed in regular books like what used to be written before, or people have to go and come back the next day because the computer system is done?
I don't foresee that as an issue, meaning the computer system shutting down for hours and we can print. However, when the law was amended, one of the things it allows for is for us to issue what is called temporary certificates. So if for any reason we can't access our computer system, God forbid, and we can't print certificates as we should, there is the provision in the Registration of Births and Deaths Act for the GRO to issue temporary certificates. All the records that are on the computerized database are also in the books. They're still in the books, still in the records. So it's a matter of that. So whatever is done on the computerized records is also updated on the physical books, and that is why if you're making changes to your record, it takes some time, because we are not allowed to just change a record one place. We have to change the records wherever they exist, so that if you come back again to get a copy of your record, that record will be updated wherever it exists. So you wouldn't have to worry that, oh, I came and I did a transaction. Right now I'm sitting there and I'm hearing people talking about coming and they came sometime and do a transaction and this and that. But we want to ensure that that doesn't happen, that does not be a complaint in the future. So once you come there to do a transaction, we ensure that in addition to being changed on the computer database, that it's also changed in the hard copy of the records. So it will always be there.
Someone had asked me to ask you to repeat this. They said you have touched on adoption, but you're touching it briefly. Can you elaborate on the process of adoption, how one goes about adopting a child and get a child registered with your department?
I touched on it briefly because that is not under my remit. Adoptions are not under my remit. What I do as a Registrar General is based on the Registration of Births and Deaths Act. I registered the adoption. So when the person would have gone through whatever agencies, that is the adoption agencies and child care and human services, and all the different things have been done. And the matter would have engaged the attention of the court, and the judge would have ruled to say that this child is now legally adopted by whomever. Once that adoption has been completed, the judge issues an order. That order must be served on the Registrar General. When it is served on the Registrar General, then that information is entered into what is called, by law, the Register of Adopted Children. That information having been entered into the Register of Adopted Children, the record, the previous record, that is the birth record of that child, is then sealed, and a new record is created, which shows the persons who would have adopted the child to be the new parents of that child. And that is a certificate that will be issued in the future for that child. I must point out that as part of the amendment in 2021, Guyana came into line with UNICEF and all the different international protocols, where a birth certificate of a child who is adopted no longer looks different from the birth certificate of a child that was born to its biological parents. Persons who were adopted or who may have known people who were adopted would have seen that their birth record that they use, the birth certificate that they use, used to be different. It used to be white, and everybody else's birth certificate was green. So soon as the child took out their birth certificate, you would know that its child has been adopted. That is no longer the case. So even if a child has been adopted, the birth certificate that they are issued now is just as a person who was a child of the biological parents. And at this time, I want to ask persons who might be listening to the program and who may have had children in their care, or they themselves might have been adopted and they were using that white birth certificate, to visit our office and have a new birth certificate issued to you, so that you will now have a birth certificate that resembles that of a child born to a biological parent. We are in the process of changing out all those birth certificates, but of course, for you to get a copy, you will have to apply for it. So we're asking persons who may have been adopted to visit our office, any one of our offices, and apply for the new birth certificates so that we can give you one of those.
Thanks. Now, folks, I want to tell all of you that I've visited the department about a week and a half ago, and I've seen some major changes there. And this is for my colleagues overseas. So rather than staying there and criticize that you can't get a birth certificate, you got to wait months and so forth, it is not true. To my Guyanese listeners at home, it is not true. It takes just a few minutes to get you a brand new birth certificate. I've been there myself. And there have been lots of changes. So, Mr. Cummings, I want to ask you, what are some of the changes you made between 2020 and 2025 to bring about this speed or fastness in getting a birth certificate?
Dr. Rose, I have to sit down and physically write the list. But there are so many things that that we have done. One of the first things is the personnel. We have had to change around the persons who were dealing with the certificates. We've had to change around the process by which the certificate was being processed. We're no longer writing certificates. So of course, you can do a lot more certificates in a day. We had when I joined the organization as the Registrar General in 2020, we had about 10 persons whose job it was to sit and write certificates. They had to physically write certificates from persons who would have applied. So when you apply for a certificate, somebody had to go and pick up the book, find the book, check the information, ensure that the information is correct and correct whatever is not there. And then someone had to physically sit down and copy that information on a certificate. Now, you would appreciate that if you have someone writing names all day, what will happen? And therefore, that is what led to a lot of errors being entered into the system, either persons being given a birth certificate with the incorrect spelling of their name, or the information being entered in the record being stated or spelled incorrectly. With the certificates being printed, what it does, once you would have been issued with a certificate and the information is correct on that certificate, you can basically close your eyes and go anytime and apply for a certificate and get the correct information. Because you don't change the information, it's not being typed. It's in the database, so all you do is click and say print. So you don't have a problem. And we have the capacity, right now to print in excess of 20,000 birth certificates a day. The longest time it takes is to find the record on the system. And if you sit down, if you come to us when we have any one of our exhibitions in Guyana, you can see it takes a couple of seconds to find the information. You put it in a queue, how long it takes to print a document, that is what it is. Basically,
have there been any attempt on your part or your department to explain to the people publicly about the changes made and how fast they can get a birth certificate today as compared to previous times?
I don't want to answer that by saying yes, because I don't think it's necessary for persons to know about all the changes. What is necessary for them to know is that they need to use the facilities available to them to get a copy of their certificate. We have programs that we do on radio, television. As I said, we go out and do public education. We talk to people all the time to educate them about the need to get their certificates done. Not necessarily telling them how fast you could get it, but we've been telling them that about the need. And when persons use the process, they like some of your listeners, they would appreciate the fact that the system is much faster now. It's not where I would like it to be, but it's much faster.
There have been a lot of demand for corrections to be made by, as you said, some people writing all day and so forth. People made mistakes, but has there been a lot of demand for that to make the corrections?
Yes,
errors?
Yes, there is, and it's too much. One of the amendments allows, as I said earlier, for the Registrar General to amend the records based on the information provided, and once the relevant identification documents and so on have been had. And we do in excess of 200 corrections per week. Some of them are not corrections based on errors that were introduced into the system. Some of them are corrections or what we call amendments based on persons who may have been using deed polls. Some persons may have left the country, become a citizen in another country, and when they became a citizen in another country, they started using another name or another variation of their names, the spelling of their names. So, and when they visit Guyana, they want to have a birth certificate with that same variation of spelling. So with all of the different things that are going on, we do in excess of 200 a week.
Now, I'll ask you another question is that some people, when they get married, the female takes the husband's name. If there's a divorce, there's some females who continue to use their husband names, and there are others who want to change their names back to the original names. Do they come back to you to get those names changed on the birth certificate?
When you get married, your name is not changed. You adopt a new name.
Right.
So your name is not changed on your birth record. So what happens is that if you would have adopted the name through marriage and you got a divorce or your spouse would have died and you want to go back to using your maiden name, or even you don't even have to be divorced or separated. You could just decide that I'm going to go back to using my maiden name. You just go to the places that issue you your documents in that married name, and you present them with affidavits or evidence that you no longer, the relationship no longer persists. It came to a legal end, and therefore you want to change it back. I don't know what is the legality of continue using your spouse's name if you're separated. I know in some jurisdictions, when you see the divorce, it specifies that the persons must go back to using their original name or their maiden name. Or sometimes it says that the woman can continue using the name that she adopted. Or sometimes it says that she will be required to use the name that she adopted. So it varies based on a person's own preferences and what transpired at the time of the marriage. We know the famous case with Tina Turner when she got divorced and she sued to continue using Turner. That was a long thing since I was a little boy growing up. They sued Tina Turner and being allowed to use the name Turner after she divorced because she had made her life with the name Turner.
Right.
But your name but your name is not changed on your birth record when you get married, and it's something that too many people still ask for. And I have to remind them that if your name is on the birth certificate, you're not a miss, you're not Mrs., you're Miss. And Miss Cummings and Mrs. Cummings is two different people, even though their first name might be the same. So if you change your name on your birth certificate, it misrepresents who you really are. And on that note, I must say that we've had incidents where, or times where males have changed their names when they got married to use the last name of the woman, because our law now allows for a person to use a name of their choice. So we've had a few cases where when the parties got married, that the man chose to use the name of his wife, the last name of the wife, or the family name of the wife. We've had a case where both parties decided they're going to use a totally new name. So we're evolving as a nation. Our laws are evolving. We're evolving as a people, and therefore we'll find these different things popping up every now and then.
Now, Mr. Cummings, I have a question. I don't know how to ask you this question. I don't know. And I don't know if you want to answer it either. But if you don't want to answer it, you don't have to answer it. The person is asking me, are you allowed to marry a person of the same sex? You don't have to answer if you don't want to answer it.
No. It's a question that I can answer because it's a question that I've been asked over and over.
Okay.
The Constitution of Guyana does not allow us to marry two persons of the same sex. So and we cannot issue you a license. So if you don't have a license, you can't marry. So the short answer is no, we can't. The law does not allow us to do that. So we can't. We can only do, we're slaves to the act. We can only do what the act allows us to do. It's not us doing what we think is right or what we think should be done. Whatever we do, the power that allows us to do whatever we do is derived from the Registration of Births and Deaths Act and from the Marriage Act, the Status of the Child Act, and these sorts of things. So we have to have a legal basis to do everything that we do.
This same person is telling me that, I don't know how to believe this one. I don't know the answer to this. That in certain European countries, there's a cutoff age for marriage. Is there such a thing in Guyana? Could you marry someone who is 90 years old? I don't know. She mentioned a few countries here. I'll have to go back and check it if there's a cutoff age for marriage. But is there a cutoff age for marriage in Guyana?
There is not a cutoff age, but what the law says is that a person must be of sound mind.
Yeah.
And therefore, if there's no age that you say you can't marry somebody if they're older than this. Once a person is of sound mind and they are aware of what they're doing, they are adults. Once they have the legal, what do you call it? The legal capacity to enter into a contract, they can get married. You can't tell a person that, oh, you're too old, you can't get married. How could you do that? That is discrimination of some sort. If a person is at a certain age, you might have a person who is 90 and who might, I know people who are in their 60s and they suffer from different forms of illnesses that does not allow them to have the mental capacity to enter into contracts, to get married. And I'm calling a big age there. I've had a case where a parent had filed an order in the court, filed and obtained an order from the court that prevented her son from being married, because she said that he was not mentally competent to make a decision to be married, and the court upheld her decision, and I couldn't issue the license, and the guy was in his 20s. So it's not an age, it's having the mental competence, the legal competence to enter into a contract and to know what you're doing. So yes, our laws do address it, but it might not address it by saying an age. And I don't think that the laws in those countries might stipulate an age either, a cutoff age to say, if you're older than this, you can't get married. I don't know. Maybe I'll have to check it to see, but I don't see the usefulness of that. We have many people who are pretty old, and someone was talking about persons who would have done religious marriages. We've had persons who are pretty elderly who would have done religious marriages years ago, never were married legally, and they're now coming to get married legally. What are you going to tell them, that you're too old to get married? No, we can't do that. You have people who were married according to religious rites for 50 and 60 years. And they're coming to the end of their life, close to the end of their life, and they now decide to do the legal marriage because of whatever is happening in their life and whatever they perceive will happen in their life. And what do?
The person mentioned 3 Scandinavian countries and 1 in the Baltic region, but I'll go back and check it myself. I've never heard of that. My question to you, well, this should be the final question. How important, I want you to tell our listeners, how important is the General Registrar's Office? Because it registers you when you were born and when you were dead, and it even issue marriage certificates and keep your records. So it's a department that has your full records throughout your lifetime. I wanted to expound on that a little.
Okay, let me say it. It's important for every person. It is the most important thing for every person who is a Guyanese to ensure that you are registered at the General Register Office. That is where you receive your identity as a citizen of Guyana. Without a certificate, a birth certificate being issued by the General Register Office, you cannot be considered as a citizen of Guyana unless you have unless you become a citizen by naturalization. Now, if you're married, the way to prove that you're married is not through pictures, it's through the marriage certificate. So you have to ensure that your records have been lodged. And I try to encourage persons who are getting married, and more I'm telling people to avoid doing these bans and notices and all of that. Come and get a licensed marriage. We are having too many cases where persons have gone the process of bans and notices, and when they get to the General Register Office, then they find that the information provided by the other party was not quite truthful, and therefore their marriage cannot really be considered legal because one party was either married or they had some other impediment that prevented them from getting married. So and therefore it's very important, because for you to be considered married, and because at the time when you get married, you're actually establishing an estate. And for that estate to be established and to be considered legal, all the legal framework must be in place. The foundation must be there. And at the GRO is where the foundation is laid. When a person dies, and an estate is created there also. And therefore, if you don't do what is necessary, as so many people are finding out belatedly, if you don't do what is necessary, it becomes difficult for you to deal with that estate at that time when your grief would be over and you're now trying to get your life back together. Consider the pain that it causes people when they would have just finished grieving, or their period of grief would be over, and they're now trying to get their life again, together again, only to discover that they didn't do what they had to do, and there are so many things that have to be done in order to finalize whatever arrangement and to have that estate going again. So it's extremely important. I want to ask persons to continue to support the work that we do. If you would have heard this program and you know people who would have been existing without their source documents, please encourage them to visit our office. Sometimes the process takes a little longer than at other times based on the amount of information that the person have. And I want to encourage persons when they're visiting us, especially when they have difficulties with their record, to gather as much information as possible. Write it down and walk with it so that we can look at the information, we can analyze the information, and we can find their records. What we have been finding is that like 1/3 of the persons who are requesting to be registered late because they claim they didn't have a birth certificate, about 1/3 of those persons we actually find records for them. So don't be despair. Don't get worried. We are there. We are a government agency, and I should have said this at the beginning, and I didn't say it, and I do hope that people take note of it. All our services are free of cost. And I want to repeat it again. All our services are free of cost. The only thing that you pay for is what comes at the end of the service. That is that birth certificate, the death certificate, the marriage certificate that you get at the end of the process. And you pay a nominal fee. It's $300 for a copy of a birth, death, or marriage certificate. If you are having that certificate expedited, you will be asked to pay $3,000 to have it expedited.
That's very cheap. Mr. Cummings, you have done an excellent job tonight. I can't ask for any person better to explain this. It's extremely, extremely important for all Guyanese to know about about the department, the General Registrar's office. And the thing is, you have done, as I said, an outstanding job. Folks, Mr. Raymond Cummings is the General Registrar at the Department of the General Registrar's office. So you have any problems, go there, see one of the clerks or any one of the people there, and they can tell you they've been extremely courteous. And unlike many of the departments, that is something that I went there myself and experienced. Mr. Cummings, we have come to the end of the program, so I'll ask you to make a final comment, a closing remarks, if you wish.
I want to thank you for inviting me on the program, and I do hope that I've been able to add clarity and some knowledge to the persons who were unaware of some of the things that we have done there. I would want to encourage persons to please use our online services. You can use our WhatsApp service, and I'll share the number. Maybe you can put it up at the end of the program. It's 610-9394. You can send us a WhatsApp message on 610-9394, and it's a message service. Please do not call, because if you call, nobody will be able to answer you. So it's 610-9394. You can go on our Facebook page, and that is General Register Office Guyana. You can also use our Instagram account. We have a TikTok account. We have the normal messaging, SMS messaging, that you can send a message to us on SMS messaging. You can also go on our website. It is gro.moha.gov.gy, right? You can go on our website, and you can click on the Contact Us button, and once you click on that button, you'll get the services will pop up in the menu, and you click on what service you want to use, and you use that service. I want to thank the persons who have been supporting us over the last years, especially the period that I'm there. There are a number of persons in communities throughout Guyana that have been helping us identify persons, identify communities where there are persons who need to be registered, and I want to thank them because we've been able to respond and get into communities and put certificates in the hands of persons. Last year, we were able to issue in total for persons who would have never have had a certificate before, in excess of 5,000 certificates. Persons who would have never had a birth certificate before, for the first time, they were able to hold a certificate and say, this is my birth certificate, over 5,000. And we're hoping to ensure that we put a certificate in every Guyanese hand so that they'll be able to participate in the services, the social services that this government has put in place, so that they can be able to get an ID card, they can get a passport if need be, they can open a bank account, they can get a driver's license, they can travel where they want, whatever it is they have to get. They can apply for a house lot, they can do whatever it is they need to do. We want to be able to be there to ensure that we support the work that this government is doing and support the opportunities being made available to all Guyanese by presenting them with that source document. Thank you very much, and I do look forward to hearing more from you and serving the Guyanese people. Thank you.
I must thank you, Mr. Cummings, and as you folks should know, Mr. Cummings said the services are all free. But at the end, you pay for your birth certificate or your marriage certificate or whatever it is, and it's a nominal fee. Mr. Cummings, thank you very much. And I must also want to thank our sponsors and our listeners very much, as well as Mr. Noir Singh for making this program available, and our technical directors, Devin Bissoon and Ryan Gobin. This has been a very informal conversation tonight, and I hope you folks learn a lot from it and get the experience and the knowledge that you need, so that when you go to the General Registrar's office, you'll be treated and served very, very well. I've been there myself, and it happened to me. So I would encourage all of you, rather than staying and criticizing outside and say, well, it's a long time. No, that don't exist anymore. It has been very, very short period of time. And at this time, I also want to mention that I would like other heads of department to come on our program to explain to the people about the services that are being available today, as Mr. Cummings did so excellently. I could not have asked for a better person to come on this program to talk about birth certificates, deaths, and registration and everything else. So, Mr. Cummings, thank you very much, and have a pleasant, wonderful evening. And to all our listeners again and our sponsors, thank you, and God bless you.